Hello, welcome to The Exhausted Programmer. My name is Alexander, and today we are talking about making colorful text in a bash prompt. As you may or may not know, when I make these videos, sometimes I don't actually type in the stuff you see being typed on the screen. I have a system put in place that allows me to run things in a real bash prompt, but do so with automated text being provided, so I don't have to worry about things like talking while typing or making typos. This is something that I think other people might be interested in, especially for making presentations. So this is going to be part one of a series where we sort of build up that script together so I can explain the different components that go into it. Now, when creating any new product or software, a thing that's really worth thinking about is who has already solved this problem, because more than likely someone has already solved this problem. This problem of recording a bash screen has been solved. There's a lot of different ways to record what you're doing into a system, but what I think a lot of them lack for me is just a smoothness and a chance to sort of take away that live nervousness that happens when people try to do things off the cuff, like me right now talking to this camera. This system allows me to queue up all my commands, make sure they all run, because I can actually run through this before I even start recording, and it will generate the actual output that we're seeing as opposed to simulated output, so that if someone runs this on their own, of course, things change with software all the time, but if nothing has changed in the software versions, they should be able to get the exact same results by using the exact same script. And these are all things that I value, that my system gives me, that I don't know if another system quite gets completely. In order to have that clean presentation though, you need to have a prompt on your screen. Some people have prompts that are just a single $sign, and some people have no color in their prompts. I've worked on machines that is just a black and white screen, no colors and anything like that, and I can pretend that's what I'm working on for my own personal use. But as you've seen in my videos, my prompt has color, and so I want to show you how that color gets put to the screen, both by bash and by me when I make my bash videos. Since the last video, I have reinstalled not only Ubuntu on this system, but actually the entire operating system, which is Windows 10. So if things seem a little bit different, then maybe you're noticing those things. The idea that we're going to be using here is called ANSI escape codes, and they're not new. You use them all the time, probably. If you do ls and you get different colors for your different types of things, I've changed mine to be all a little bit on the lighter side, but this is yellow versus white. If you can't see that on your screen. If you've ever tried to look into how you can change that yourself, our C settings, I think, and somewhere there's going to be a giant block of code for your ls colors. And what we're seeing here is actually a similar system. The numbers 30 and 31 through 35 are all color numbers that we'll be using in this video. Well, we won't be using them all ourselves in this video, but that's what these are. The 1 I know means bright. This is stuff that you'll pick up in this video, and this is where a lot of these numbers come from. It is important for us to be able to experiment with this. So let's set up the experimentation, and we can do a lot of experimenting with echo. When we echo hello, we get what we wanted on the screen. I do want to mention at this point that this video is not scripted, even though this is going to be used to help make the scripted video, and it's because we're talking about how to make the colors. And while I could spend some time trying to debug how to display the colors, a lot of that stuff is baked into the system, and I'd have to do a lot of adjustments. So instead, to prevent typos, we'll be doing a lot of copying and pasting. So instant text. Anyway, in order to use those escape codes, we have to give it what is called an escape sequence. Here I use \033. There are other options that may or may not work in your system, but as far as I can tell, this is like the most likely to work, but you might want to try something else in the future. And then we give it this square bracket. It's actually part of the escape sequence. And then following that, there'll be a bunch of values that can be separated by semicolons, and then M tells it to end, and then we'll have our text. But when I hit enter on this, it actually will not work. And it's for a very good reason. Just assumes we want to put on the screen what we're actually seeing. With echo, at least with my system, the -E flag, and there we go. Now we see something has changed. So if we look at the echo pages, -E, enable interpretations of \escapes. I also said that there are other escape sequences. We can do E, and you can use that, and maybe that looks better for whatever you're making. But for me, I prefer to go with this because this just really hits you over the head like something weird's going on. Now we can determine just from looking at this that the value 33 represents yellow here, but how do we know what number is for what color? Well, I'll link it in the description, but I am referencing a Wikipedia page for ANSI escape codes. There's a lot of information on this page, but here is just for the colors. Notice the foreground 33 is yellow. We can set the background color as well. Using these values, we'll show that off in a second. And down here, there's these bright colors, but we'll actually access the bright in a different way. There's a lot of information here, and in my experience, most of it does not apply to any one system. It covers a lot of things such as the Windows XP console versus the Windows PowerShell console. And we could scroll to the right to see even more options, but I'm afraid if I do, it will just scroll in any random place. So take my word for it. But if you are finding this video interesting and you want to dive in deeper before I make my next video, or even beyond what my videos cover, this Wikipedia article is a great place to continue researching. Let's go ahead and just show off that background color real quick. If we add 10 to the value, we get the background color. We also notice that there's a problem with it continuing on. Beyond that, we'll cover how to deal with that in a little bit. On that table, that also showed bright colors, but for my system, instead of doing, I think 93 for bright yellow, we actually can change some characters together. We saw this in our ls colors variable earlier, that sometimes it would be a 1 in front of a number, and in this case, it's for the bright version. So this is the normal version, and this is for the bright version. Now, if we look at this prompt here, we see that we actually have one color, another color, and then a third color. And we too can have different colors on the same output for our echo command. Again, if you want to test how things look before you put them into your program, this is kind of what we're showing off. But let me copy this. And there we go. So 33 is for yellow, 34 is for blue. Of course, we could make either one of these bright if we wanted to by doing the 1 colon in front of it. So let's do that to the blue to see our bright blue. When we do this, the blue changes color because we put the 1 in front of it. And here is where I would tell you to notice the first gotcha, although we kind of saw it already, that sometimes these applications of values don't go away when we might think they do. So let's copy this line here. And what we're going to do is try to make the yellow bright. We're going to use the default for the blue, but when we run this, we see that we get the lighter blue. And that is because we didn't remove this one ever. So whenever we apply a new color, it removes the previous color. You have to imagine that there already exists a colorway out here, and this changes it to 33, and this changes to 34. This changes the brightness value to 1, and this does not change it away from 1. We need to be careful when we're doing that, and the way I am careful in my script when doing that is that when I want a non-bright color, I am very explicit and put a 0 in front of it. And here we see that we have the bright yellow, but we have the darker blue. This might not show up really well on your screen. Different environments that I'm working on, these colors are different shades. That's the nature of this technology. If we are referencing the Wikipedia page, we'll see that there's other font modifiers that we can apply. There is a 4, which gives us an underline. There is a 7, which will actually invert the colors. And here at the end, I'm setting everything back to 0 for the default so that it doesn't continue on to affect my prompt. So when I run this, we do have an underline, hello, and space because that's included here. And then the colors get inverted with the word world, and there's a space at the end of that as well. So it continues on for space later. Again, just showing that you can chain these things together, but also like be very aware of what you're modifying. If we didn't want that extra space, we could just get rid of it. If we didn't have this at the end here, the inverted color flag would continue to last here, which is not something that we would want. When I was setting this up for myself, I created a little script to make sure that everything was working well. And this shows off the different colors that I have access to and what I named them here. Obviously, black on black isn't going to show up. When you start developing it yourself, you can give it the names that you want to give it. So instead of this being bright yellow and this being just yellow, I wanted this one to be the yellow, the default yellow, and this one to just be dark yellow as a variation if I want to use it. I can show you how I have these variables set up in a second. A very interesting thing that came out of all this is the fact that light gray is actually the default text color. And this is actually a bright version of the light gray. I think they do call this white, and then this one bright white. But I decided to go with light gray, gray, and then black, where this is a bright black. This is a default color, and this is a bright white. But again, you can name them whatever you want, whatever makes sense for you when you're setting up your variable names. If we actually look at the color test, we'll see that I have variables that I've defined somewhere else in this bash color, however I want to define them. And then this no color here is so that I could put in the text that we could read, since we couldn't read this on the black background. I will be providing some code, but I would strongly suggest you make this yourself. As you notice here, I import this bash colors script. The importing isn't maybe how you might want it to be if you come from any other programming language. It's because all these variables are set here, and if any other script that's in the system, so if you're importing more scripts or you're wanting to define your own variables, you can easily overwrite these because there's no concept of local and global in this context. It's really easy to overwrite your variables, so it's good if you keep your bash libraries small and you sort of write them yourself so that you're more familiar with everything in them. But here we see my escape sequence here. I could just replace this with an E and then everything would still work because I now reference it by variable. No color, this is really just to get rid of all of the variations that I put on text. This will just get it back to the default. I do tag all my colors, either normal brightness or bright brightness. I have the underline and inversion tags here, and then I wanted flashing to work, but it does not work on my system. I could show that in a second. In fact, I might. There are some things that are involved with other things that we'll work on in the next video or two, such as hiding the cursor and showing the cursor, but that's not important for this colors. And here we can see where I defined all the colors how I wanted to define them. So white is the bright gray color as opposed to light gray, which is the normal brightness gray white color, because that's what makes most sense to me. So the dark blue was darker when I wrote this. I think this system is a little bit brighter with its colors than my previous install was, but that's again another reason why you want to define them yourselves. Just look at the colors and figure out if you want one to be the default and the other one to be the bright variation, or for it to be the dark variation. Just whatever makes sense in your head when you're writing the script. We did show earlier where you can have a background color, but I didn't do that with a foreground color being changed. Just want to make sure that that's clear. We can run this such that we have a foreground of blue and a background of yellow. It does look really bad, but the order I don't think matters. So let's just go ahead and change this to 34. Yeah, and it's still the same thing because the ordering of these modifiers don't matter. Again, this is why you might want to write it yourself, because if you read my script, you would assume that the foreground color has to be last because it's always last on my script, but that's just how I do it. When I organized it, it's not a standard in the practice. One last thing I want to show off, but I have to get a camera out to show a screen that I'm not screen recording. So what we have here is my Mac Mini, something that's been sitting in a closet for way too long, but it's running Ubuntu, and I can show off a little bit more of how the variations exist between different interpretations of the terminal screen. Interpreting the ANSI code is up to the terminal screen. I'm sure also Bash has something to do with it as well, but it's ultimately what version of whatever you're using to interpret the text coming through. And so while I am running both Ubuntu on my Windows machine and this Mac Mini, again, Ubuntu as a subsystem on Windows, but this is its actual install on the Mac Mini. We still have the ANSI codes working as expected. We can go for that bright color yellow, which might be kind of hard to tell, I don't know. But this also covers the dim version, something that I cannot do on my Windows subsystem for Linux, again, even though they're both running the same version of Bash. Also, while this does support the underline, like the other system does, it also supports the strike through, which I am now trying to remember what it was, which is 9. So I can do a strike through on my Ubuntu machine. I cannot do it in my Ubuntu installation on my Windows submachine. So it is a reason why you might want to do this on your own so that you know what your machine actually supports and what it doesn't. There's a lot more that this supports, but there's no reason for me to show that here. Just to answer a few questions you might have before you drop them in the comments is, why didn't I SSH to this machine to show those off? Again, it's up to the terminal display, not the shell that you're in. I did actually demonstrate this on another computer to myself, where I go to that computer, I can run some of these ANSI codes that work, but when I SSH to them, they do not work, because ultimately I'm interpreting it through whatever program Windows is using to do all the terminal interfaces with Bash. And yes, the ANSI escape code Wikipedia page does have a lot more stuff that we could try out. I did try a lot of them out on my Windows machine, and since that's what I mostly use to record these videos, and they don't work, I don't have them in my script. But again, something for you to try out, explore, see for yourself. Another question you might have is, why did I have to record that screen as opposed to screen capture? This Mac Mini is old, and I didn't want to install new software on it because I never used this machine for anything. Whenever you see me connecting to another machine, it is also a Mac, but not this Mac. It is stuck where it's at. I wasn't going to move it here to record it, and I don't know why I didn't do a screen record on it. Oh well, I just didn't. On this machine that I'm using right here, I have 2 monitors, and well, I guess I have 3 monitors, a third monitor that is actually a TV for whenever I want to sit on the couch and watch videos. But on one of these monitors, I keep an HDMI port coming out because I like to do a lot of IT tech work. Machines go down. Sometimes you don't want to do everything through SSH. I mess around with Raspberry Pis, and when I need to access it, I can just plug this straight into that monitor that I was recording off of. I use the same setup to connect the Mac Mini or any other machine where I want to try out stuff. Some things you can do over the network, some things you just cannot, like to see if the HDMI port works on the machine you're working on. Best way to do that is to plug it in and see. In the next video in this series, we will be using those colors in order to create the fake prompts that we use whenever, or that I use whenever I go to make the scripts work. You might think, well, we can already do that right now, but there's some other things that we can do once we have the fake prompts, such as determining where the cursor needs to be and how we can get the output out as we are putting stuff to the screen that looks like that we're typing and all that kind of stuff. It's really like 3 very small ideas that combined should make for an interesting single video. And then after that, I might show you how I have a script that takes my scripts and makes them into Bash scripts so that I can run them and I don't have to actually manually type out all the Bash commands that we'll be typing out in the next video. But that's going to be for a later date. If you have any questions about this or any other topic, feel free to drop a comment below. And as always, thanks for watching.